Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today we're going to talk about the new Rush game mode in Battlefield 1. Now Rush at certain points in Battlefield's history has been my favorite game mode. Bad Company 2, it was excellent. Battlefield 3, it was also a lot of fun. Battlefield 4, it seemed to have lost its magic, and that could have been for a lot of different reasons, one of which I think in large part was just due to map design not really being designed around the Rush game mode itself. It felt like a lot of Conquest maps were sort of being forced into Rush game modes, and a lot of them didn't play out so well. Now, a lot of changes were made to Rush in Battlefield 4 that did greatly improve it, but one of the biggest problems I felt with the game mode was the fact that it was never really regulated. You had the exact same map that could be played with 64 players or 24 players, and it played out completely differently depending on how many players were there, and it could pretty much break the game mode depending on what player count was. So one thing that I've been fighting for a long time was to try and standardize the Rush game mode so you didn't have different counts of players just depending on whatever the server settings were. I think the Rush game mode should have been designed better around specific map sizes and player counts, and that seems to be what they're doing in Battlefield 1. However, it's debatable as to whether or not they've gone a bit too far with the player count reduction. It seems that we are now playing on 12 versus 12 game modes. That's 24 players total. Personally, I think 32 might have been a better balance, considering that with 12 players on a team, squads of 5 don't really break into it very evenly, and if you have 2 full squads of 5, then you're left with 1 squad of 2 players, which can be kind of a bad experience if you're trying to assault up on Rush and you only have 1 other player to spawn off of. It could be quite difficult. The other tricky thing to balance with such a small player count is vehicles, and that seems to be something that really hasn't been balanced at all in what I've played so far. Both teams started off the round with at least 2 tanks. I think maybe even the assaulting team got 3 at one point. I'm not 100% sure on how many pieces of armor were available, but there were definitely 4 tanks on the battlefield at one point in time, and that's just purely too many tanks for this many players on the battlefield, especially considering that tanks have become significantly more effective in Battlefield 1 compared to previous Battlefield games, and if there's multiple seats on a tank, you might not even have that many infantry on your team. I mean, if you think about it, 12 players on a team, 2 tanks, what if those are big heavy tanks and you got them filled up with infantry? How much more infantry do you actually have on the battlefield trying to push the objectives next to your tank? It doesn't really leave a lot for infantry combat, and I really think DICE needs to look over the quantity of armor on the battlefield and also the balance of armor. The defending team might not need defending tanks at the beginning of the round. In fact, it made it very hard for certain games, and X Factor and I had no problem holding off the first 2 sets of MCOMs and stopping the enemy team right at the beginning just because we were working together as tank drivers, and it was easy peasy trying to hold off an assaulting team. They don't have a lot of good weapons to try and take out tanks, and if their tank drivers can't coordinate and attack together, then that's pretty much it. We were able to hold them off and they couldn't push past the first set. Now, another big change is the addition of a timer in Rush, which is very interesting and potentially very controversial based on what I've seen so far. So Rush has previously just been based on a ticket system where the attacking team has a certain number of tickets. Once you run out of tickets from players dying too much, then you lose. If you take out a set of MCOMs, your tickets get reset and you assault the next set of MCOMs. In this game mode, we have 75 tickets for the assaulting team. But now, in addition to that, we also have a 10-minute timer for each set of MCOMs. So if you run out of time as the assaulting team, you lose. If you run out of tickets as the assaulting team, you lose. The problem I have with this system is that there are 2 conflicting mentalities for attacking. The timer suggests that you need to be balls out, do whatever you can in the next 10 minutes to get to the next set of MCOMs. The tickets suggest that you need to be careful and methodical with how you approach the next set of MCOMs, because if you lose all your tickets, then you die. You need to be reviving your soldiers. You can't just be running into cannon fodder, dying, losing tickets needlessly. So these 2 systems, I think, are directly conflicting with one another. They don't really inspire the same type of strategy, and I think DICE needs to choose one or the other. I don't particularly mind a timer system, but then you got to get rid of the ticket system. If you want to keep the ticket system, then we can't have a timer ending the game early because the attacking team was playing too methodically and carefully. Another change to the Rush game is that the defending team can now call in artillery strikes. You can do this by going up to your friendly MCOMs, holding E on them, much like you would plant an MCOM charge on the assaulting team, and it will call in an artillery strike. Although I was never really killed by an artillery strike and I didn't see them go off, I assume they're randomly placed, or they cut off certain areas of attack for a few seconds or something like that. I'll have to play around with them more, and you guys can definitely check it out when the beta comes out for everyone. All right, now let's talk about map design. Arguably one of the most important things when designing a good Rush game mode is having a good map design, and that's something that was a big problem with the previous Battlefield game, is just the lack of well-placed objectives, good map design catering to different styles of gameplay. The previous game mode had the problem of too many players for too small of a map, so you might have 2 or 3 lanes pushing up to an objective, 64 players, that gets absolutely insane. The map design, for the most part, doesn't seem like it's changed too much, just the player count, which ultimately makes the game mode feel a little bit more intimate, but there's still some significant problems with it. And one of the issues that I've had with Rush in general in Battlefield is that between certain MCOMs, they really don't allow certain play styles to succeed at all. Like between the first and second set of MCOMs, the map design is very wide open, which pretty much suggests that if you're going to play infantry, the only thing you can do is snipe or play with extremely long-range weapons. Ironically, World War I was supposed to have a lot of trench warfare in it, and there didn't seem to be any sort of trenches to really utilize to push up further and get closer to the MCOM. So playing with any sort of close-quarter assaulter class, anything that could take out armored targets, was really not viable for a big percentage of this game mode, and I think that's a design problem. Even if you want certain areas of Rush to cater more to sniper or long range, I think it's still important to have areas to push up for people who don't want to snipe, or people who need to play anti-armor classes because there's armored threats on the battlefield. I think the map designers need to go in there and provide at least, and at all times, at least one route for close quarter infantry or assaulter classes to move up, like one gully or one trench system. At the moment, there's areas of the map that are just like, yeah, if you got something close quarters, forget about it. You're going to get absolutely wrecked by snipers. And there was a lot of good snipers on the defending team, and it was incredibly frustrating at certain points to try and push up with a complete lack of cover. During my alpha coverage of the game, you might remember me talking about how much better the sniper class is now compared to previous Battlefield games, and a lot of that is due to the fact that there aren't any good counters to the sniper class in medium range anymore, so it pretty much dominates everybody. And this was definitely apparent on Conquest, but it's doubly apparent on Rush, where your enemies are pretty much funneled into a certain area. So as a sniper, that's ideal. You don't have people sneaking up behind you. You don't have them flanking you from weird routes. So you can just pretty much look in one general direction and absolutely wreck everybody. So the Rush game mode and the balance of the sniper class is definitely a huge change from previous Battlefield games, and it's going to be very sniper intensive unless they change the balance of the system. And in my opinion, I think they need to make the medic class a bit more effective. One of the big problems is that the DMR style weapons, the semi-auto weapons in this game, lose a huge amount of their accuracy when you fire them quickly, and this makes them very hard to fight snipers at longer range. And I think they need to make medics a bit better so that they can try and counter snipers, and also add in a bit more cover for the assaulter classes and even the support classes to try and move up and do something more in medium and close range combat. Another problematic area in the current Rush game mode, and one that was a pretty big problem in previous Battlefield games too, is the difficulty progression between MCOMs. One would think that the first set of MCOMs should be the easiest, the next set of MCOMs should be a little bit more difficult, and then so on and so forth to the point where the last set of MCOMs is the hardest. Well, I found in this map that on Sinai Desert, the city was actually the easiest place to set the MCOMs, and that was the last objective. And the first set of MCOMs was very difficult if the enemy team had good armors. The second set of MCOMs, I think, was one of the hardest set because of how open and how easy it was to get sniped on your push up towards the next set of MCOMs. So the progression of difficulty between the MCOMs was all over the place, and it felt like if you could get the second set of MCOMs, you're almost guaranteed to get to the last set. Then again, the fourth set of MCOMs was very difficult, so it seemed like that was actually one of the big stopping points, was MCOM set number 4. And then if you got past 4, the fifth one was a cakewalk. It was just super freaking easy. And at this point, I think fixing that really just comes down to basic map design philosophy. The city had a huge amount of attacking points, lots of buildings to hold up in, so for the assaulting team, it was very easy to get a foothold. If you died or your squad mates were dying around you, you could just hide in a building for a little while, let the squad mates spawn back on you and then push forward, attack the next point. Whereas big wide open areas, squads would get wiped a lot. It was very hard to stay alive, to let your squad mates respawn on you. So there's just some basic principles and philosophies in there that I think DICE has to get nailed down to make the progression system and the difficulty system match up from one MCOM to the next. And that's just one area that I feel DICE has been really weak on with their previous Battlefield game. Battlefield 4, I think, also had a big problem with progression system and just generally map design problems as well. And I think they need to get on top of that. Their games look beautiful. Their maps from an artistic standpoint are absolutely gorgeous, but from an actual gameplay design standpoint, I think their map design has been one of the weakest elements of Battlefield from Battlefield 4, and hopefully it won't be as entrenched in Battlefield 1, but then again, we've only really seen 2 maps so far and only a few game modes on those maps. So it remains to be seen what the overall map design is going to be like in Battlefield 1. It plays out really well on Conquest, I feel, but for Rush, it really does feel like it's taking a back seat in terms of map design to Conquest. Anyway, I'm sure a lot of you guys will be able to test this out for yourselves today. Let me know what you guys think of the new Rush game mode once you get to play it. Hopefully DICE can sort of get on top of it and make this game mode great again, as it really was one of my favorite Battlefield game modes of all time when designed properly. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.